Hey, what's going on, guys? So it's been a while since I did a video aside from the course release. I've been sick lately. I had some kind of viral infection with sore throat and headaches and all that crap. But I wanted to do something that doesn't require a lot of focus and thinking and programming. So I figured I'd make kind of an intro video on Visual Studio Code, which is just an awesome text editor. So I'll go over the basics as well as some of my favorite extensions, settings, and some of the IntelliSense features. We'll basically set it up from scratch. And this is completely cross-platform, so if you're on Windows, Mac, or Linux, you'll be absolutely fine with it. It's open source. It's created by Microsoft, but again, it's completely cross-platform. So if you want to download it, you can go to code.visualstudio.com. I'm not going to go through the installation because it's very self-explanatory. Just go through, click Next, and you'll get it installed. All right, so what I have here is just kind of it's not really a fresh install, but I've made it default with no plugins, no customized settings or anything like that. So it should match the state of your editor if you just installed it. So this is the welcome page, just kind of gives you some options to open a file or a folder, gives you some options over here for your color theme and all that. But we're going to go ahead and close the welcome page up. And we're going to look at the sidebar first, so the activity bar as they call it. So this first icon is your Explorer. This is where you'll open your project. So all your folders and files are in one place. And there's multiple ways to open folders. Of course, you have this button, but I'll show you some of the other ways in a few minutes. So this icon here is just a global search. So you can search things, you can replace, you can include or exclude certain files. Pretty self-explanatory. This next one is a version control icon. So this is where you can do all your Git. Once we have some files, you'll see that we'll be able to initialize a repository. We can push to a remote Git repository. And there's some really good integrated version control with Visual Studio Code. This next one is your debugger. I'm not going to go over this. This is beyond the scope of this tutorial, but there's some really nice debugging capabilities, especially for just a text editor. Remember, this isn't an IDE like Visual Studio. It's a text editor, but it has some pretty powerful debugging features. And then this icon is your extensions. So they have some recommended extensions that show up here. You can also search for them. I'm going to show you some of the ones that I use later on. And then down here we have this cog icon, and from here we have some we can go to our settings, which I'll show you in a second. Keyboard shortcuts, we can change the themes, check for updates. We also have the command palette. So if we open that up, you get this command palette in the middle of the screen, and you can pretty much do anything from here. Any kind of command in this editor you can find here. Simple commands, whoops, I can actually open it with F1 as well. So if I wanted to open a file, for instance, if I type file, this is all your recent stuff. And then this is just everything that's going to match your search. So file, you can see open recent, refresh Explorer, save all. If we click open file, it's just going to go ahead and let us open a file. So if you can't find what you're looking to do, just be sure to check the command palette and you'll probably find it there. All right, for instance, for themes, if you want to change a theme, you can go to preferences, themes, and that'll show up. So it's really handy. All right, so what I want to do now is take a look at some settings. So if we go to file preferences, settings, the way that they do this is it's basically just one big JSON file on the side here. You just have key value pairs. You have the key, which is the option or the setting, and then the value of it. And there's different categories that you can choose from. So files, window, editor, commonly used. And what you would do if you want to customize any of these is take the key value pair and put it over on this side. So this is your customized file. So you'll always have all your customizations in one place rather than having to remember the toggle switches that you switched off and on like in other editors. So I actually prefer this method of keeping your settings. So if we just put some curly braces here, one of the first things that I always change is my editor size. And that's usually for you guys so you can see what I'm doing. By default, it's 14, but I'm going to go ahead and paste that key value pair in here and just change it to 26. You want to remove the last comma of the last setting and then just Control or Command S to save, and it'll kick in right away. All right. So autosave is another popular feature a lot of developers use. I don't use it, but what that does is it'll autosave. It'll save your files automatically without you having to save them. If you want to change the delay, you can search. Okay, so that's another thing. You can go in this bar and you can search for settings. So if I search autosave, you'll see down here files.autosave delay. It's set to 1 second by default, or 1,000 milliseconds, but you can change that if you want. Okay, so another thing that I usually change is my tab size. So I'll go ahead and grab that, put a comma here, paste that in. And I usually like to change this to 2 because I think 4 makes it makes your code go over a little bit too far. So 2 kind of makes it a little more compact. So that's one thing I always change. Another thing that I always change is word wrap. So if I just search for wrap, right here you can see by default it's off, meaning that my code will go off the page. And I don't like that, especially for you guys. I want you guys to see all the code. So I always have to turn that on. So we'll go ahead and switch that to on. Another thing I usually change is my terminal font size. Again, so you guys can see it. So we'll say search for terminal. And if we go down here, you'll see the default font size is 14. So I'm going to copy that, paste it in over here, and I'm going to change that to 26. All right, and just remove that trailing comma, and I'll go ahead and save that. And that's all I'm going to do for now. And you guys can look through the settings and kind of experiment if you want. All right, so next thing, let's go ahead and open a project. Now I could hit open folder, and the project I want to open is on my desktop. It's this Vanilla.js weather application that we created in the new JavaScript course. So we could go ahead and open it that way, select folder, or we could go ahead and select the folder in our Explorer and just go open with code, and that'll open it right inside the folder. Another thing we could do is open it from the command line or the terminal. So if I go to my git bash, which is my terminal program I use for Windows, and just do code dot, that will open it in that folder as well. All right, so a couple ways to open your project. So before we go ahead and look at code writing and efficiency and all that and IntelliSense, I want to take a look at the terminal, because that's one of my favorite features of this editor is the integrated terminal. So if we go to view and then integrated terminal, you'll see it pops up down here. We can also do control tilde, that will toggle it, and we can make this bigger or smaller if we want. And by default, if you're on Windows, as I am, you're going to have PowerShell as the default type of terminal. All right, now I don't like PowerShell. I don't like the standard Windows command line. I prefer to use git bash. If you want to use git bash, you can get it from git-scm.com. It's also available for Mac, but you don't really need it with Mac because there's a pretty good standard bash editor or terminal in Mac. So or in OS X. So Windows, not so much. You'd probably want something like this, or you could use the new integrated Ubuntu in certain versions of Windows 10 and up, but I haven't gotten into that yet. I'm perfectly content with git bash, so that's what I use. Now, if you want to use that down here instead of PowerShell, you'll have to add a setting. So again, we're going to go to Preferences, Settings, and over here, actually, we'll just search for Terminal. And we'll scroll down to, let's make this smaller. And what we want is, did I pass it? Right here. Terminal integrated shell windows, and you'll see it points to PowerShell.exe. So what we want to do is copy this key value pair and go ahead and put a comma here and paste it in. And then we want to change this to the location of git bash, which the default is going to be not in the Windows folder, but in Program Files. And we're going to do --git --bin, not dash, // and then bash.exe. Okay, so that should be right. So let's save this. And then let's go ahead and close this up. Now, if I close my editor and open it back up, it's still PowerShell. What we need to do is add a new terminal because we can have multiple terminals. You'll see it says one PowerShell. We only have one terminal open, which is PowerShell, but if I click the plus, the next one I open is going to be Bash by default because of that setting. So we can have as many as we want. I could put another one, so now we have 3 different terminals open. Now the PowerShell one, I'm going to select and I'm going to hit the delete, and that's going to get rid of it. So now we just have 2 Bash terminals. All right, if I were to list the contents of the folder here in this one and then switch to this terminal, you'll see it's not there because this is completely different. It's a completely different environment. So what this is great for is if you're doing like Angular development or React, where you have the CLI and you have a dev server and you need to run that server, and that takes up your terminal, so you can't use it. So what you would do is run that, for instance, you'd run like ng serve or whatever it may be, npm start if it's a Node.js app, and then just switch to another terminal to do all your other stuff, to create your components or whatever it is that you plan on doing. All right, and of course you can just do standard commands. You can create files. So if I say touch file.js, you'll see that creates a file up here, file.js. If I want to remove it, I can use the rm command and just say rm file.js, and that removes it. And I do have a video on basic command line if you want to check that out. All right, so enough on the terminal. Let's go ahead and close that up. And now what I want to do is open up one of these files. We'll open up the app.js, which is just vanilla JavaScript. And I want to just take a look at some of the IntelliSense features. Now, when we talk about IntelliSense, we're talking about features like code completion, parameter info, drop downs, quick info, stuff like that. Stuff that makes your coding more efficient. So for example, this line here, we have the document object and we're calling the add event listener method, passing in an event to listen on, and then the function to run when that event runs. So let's go ahead and rewrite this line. Now, as soon as I start typing, we're going to get this drop down. And document is actually one of those options, okay? Because it by default, VS Code, the IntelliSense works with JavaScript. Okay, it works with JavaScript, TypeScript, JSON, HTML, CSS, Sass and less, and I think that's it by default. So anything else, Python, PHP, you just have to install the extension to get the IntelliSense, which is very, very simple. Just go to extensions and search for it. So again, let's go back and let's do a dot, and we'll see all the options available with document dot. So we want add event listener. And then we'll go ahead and we'll put in the event we want to listen on, which is DOM content loaded. And we'll put a comma here. Now this tells us the parameter type, parameter info for add event listener. It's telling us it takes in a type and it takes in it's a string. Okay, so it even gives you the data type. So what I'm going to put here is the get weather function. So if I start to type get W, you'll see get weather pops up because that's a function down below. So I'll go ahead and put that in. Now, another cool thing that this IntelliSense does is camel case hinting. So let's say I just do G and then capital W, and you'll see get weather will show up. So it'll match whatever the case. So if I were to, let's see, if I were to have a function here called go while, like that, and I were to go and type in lowercase g, uppercase W, you'll see go while will pop up along with get weather. So I think that's a really cool feature of the IntelliSense. Okay, so let me just get rid of that line. Now, as far as your functions, like let's say we have this get weather that it's calling. If we want to know where this function is and look at the contents of it, we can right click and we can say go to definition, and that'll bring us down to the get weather function. Now, if you don't want your actual spot or your cursor to move, you can just go peak definition, and it'll give you this pop-up with the function, and you can actually edit it here as well. Okay, so you could go ahead and you can edit that function from this pop-up and save it. All right, which is very handy. Okay, another thing you could do is you could do right click and you could say change all occurrences, and it'll choose all the get weathers. And let's say you wanted to change it to, I don't know, get status, and you'll see down here it's also changing here and here, anywhere where it says get weather, okay, which can be handy as well. Now, as far as keyboard shortcuts go, a lot of them are standard to pretty much all text editors, but there are some that stand out with VS Code. So obviously, if you want to go to the beginning of a line, then you could click, I'm going to put my cursor right here. So if I click the home key, that'll bring me to the beginning of the line. If I hit the end key, that'll go to the end. If I want to go to the first line of the file, I could do Control Home. If I want to go to the end, I could do Control End, and that brings me down there. All right, so we can move our cursor where we want. And if we want to do things like, let's say, copy a line, so right here, you can see where my cursor is. I'm going to just do Control C and then go down below it, or go anywhere. Let's go right here, and I'll hit Control V, and that'll paste it in. All right, and obviously Control Z is going to undo it. If I want to cut it, I could go to that line and I could do Control X, it'll cut it out. I could go down here and paste it in, just like that. If I want to copy a line down, for instance, I could go to the beginning here with the home key, and I could do Shift Alt down, and that will copy it down. Okay, and we can copy them up as well. So if I wanted to move it down, not just copy it, then I could just do Alt down or Alt up, and I can just move the line around. Okay, so if I wanted to add a comment here, I could do Control / and that would comment out the line. I can just toggle it again with Control /. Now if I wanted to comment out a block of code, like let's say this entire event listener with this function, then I could just highlight it and do Control / and I can toggle that as well. All right, now I'm not going to go over all of the shortcuts because there's just a ton of them. If you want to change any of them, you can go to your preferences, keyboard shortcuts, and you can see all the different shortcuts here, and you can click on edit and you can change it to whatever combination you want. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about real quick is Emmet. Now Emmet is really good for HTML and CSS. It allows you to use abbreviations that allow you to write your markup much quicker. Now I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I actually have a full video on Emmet. It's like a 40-minute video, but I'm going to go to my HTML file and just get rid of this for a second. And if I wanted to have, like, let's say an H1, I could do H1 tab, and that'll give me a beginning and ending tag. If I wanted to have a class on that H1, I could do H1 dot for class and then test, and that gives me a class of test. If I wanted it to be an ID, I could do hash test tab, and it gives us the ID of test. Okay, tab is the hotkey by default, but again, you can go into your keyboard commands, which I just showed you, and you can look for the hotkey for Emmet and change it if you want. Now, if we want just a div, we don't even have to specify an element. We can just say hash test or whatever, and it gives us a div with the ID of test. We could do the same for class. If I wanted a class of foo, tab, and it gives us a class of foo. And then if I'd want to do, let's say 3 or let's say 4 li tags, I could do li times 4 tab, and it gives us 4 of them. Okay, and I can also do an HTML boilerplate if I do exclamation tab, and it gives us the doc type, the HTML, and head and body tags, which is really efficient, so we don't have to type all this stuff out every time. All right, but that's about as far as into Emmet as I'm going to go. Like I said, I do have a full video on Emmet. So let me just put my file back and save. Actually, one thing I want to mention about Emmet is if you want to use it in certain, let's say, template engines like Edge, for instance, which is a template engine that Emmet doesn't work in by default. What you would need to do is go to your settings, so preferences settings, which you can also get to with Control comma. Okay, so you can get to it that way as well. And then just search for Emmet, and there's a crap load of options for Emmet. The one we want is included languages. So right here, Emmet included languages. So I would take this, put it over here, And if I wanted to use it with edge templating, I could just put in edge and say that we want this basically rendered as HTML, and that would Emmet would then be allowed to use. You could use it with edge. Okay, so I'll just keep that there. And I believe you need to do the same with things like JSX for React and other template engines as well. Okay, so now I'll show you how to change the theme. So if we go to this settings, to this icon down here, we can go to color theme, and you have all these different themes you can choose from. Abyss, which I really don't like. If we go to, let's say, Monakai, this is actually a really popular one. This makes it look like Sublime Text's default theme, which a lot of people like. And another way I can get here is through the command palette. If I click F1 and just type in theme, you'll see preferences, color theme, and that brings you to this as well. Let's see, red. I don't know who would use that, but I just like the default theme. I don't know, maybe I'm just a simple guy, but I prefer the default dark plus theme, which is this here. All right, and if you want to install custom themes, you can just go back there and go to the bottom and say install additional color themes, and then you have all these themes on the side here, and you can install those just as if you were to install an extension. All right, so that brings us to extensions. So let's click on this icon here. Let's actually clear this up, and we can search for extensions here. So the first one I'm going to install is an extension called Bracket Pair Colorizer, and as you can see, as you type, it does kind of a smart search, and it's this one right here, Bracket Pair Colorizer. And what this does is it adds colors to your to bracket pairs so that you don't get confused with, for instance, nested if statements. When you have a bunch of stuff nested into each other and you have all these different curly braces or brackets or parentheses, and it gives them color pairs. All right, this extension was introduced to me by Dylan from Code 360, Coding Tutorials 360, which is a great channel and you should check out as well. So let's go ahead and install this. And once you install an extension, you just want to click reload. Excuse me. Sorry if my voice is a little raspy, guys. Now, if we look at, let's say, the get weather function right here. So you can see the curly braces are yellow. Inside here, we're calling a get weather method from the weather object. And inside there, we have we're getting a promise. So we're using then, but these curly braces are blue. Okay, these curly braces are blue because they're inside of these ones. Now, if we were to have some kind of if statement in here with another set of curly braces, those are yellow. Okay, if we put another one in here, those are purple. We'll do another one, those are blue. So it's going to rotate between these colors, which makes things much less confusing when you have a lot of nested blocks. Okay, so that's one of the extensions that I use quite a bit. Another one is Live Server, and I'm sure if you guys have watched a lot of my videos, you probably know about this one. It basically gives you a development server, and it gives you auto load functionality, and you can use it with just a single HTML file. Okay, so this is great for like vanilla JavaScript applications where you're not using Node.js or Angular or anything with a dev server or Webpack or something like that, and you want to open it up in a development server. It just gives you a better environment to work with. Okay, and of course you get the auto load. So let's go ahead and install this. All right, so it's installed. I'm going to click reload. And then what I'm going to do is you want to go to your HTML file, and then this is where you want to start your server from. Now there's two ways to do it. You can go down here and you see you'll have this go live link, or you can right click in the file and you can say open with live server, and then it's going to open on your loopback address, your local host, on port 5500 by default. And you can see we have our application. So this, like I said, this is an application that uses a weather API. This is in the JavaScript course that I just created. We could change the location if we want, and that'll get saved to local storage. So if I reload, it's still there. But either way, no matter what it is, even if it's just a static HTML website with no JavaScript, it's still a nice little environment to work in. And again, it's auto load, so I'll show you if I snap this over here. And let's see. All this stuff, the weather info, is generated in JavaScript, so I need to find something I can change here. Let's just take the that's the modal. Let's take the change location text right here, which is this button, and we'll just change it to test and just save, and you'll see automatically it auto loads and changes. Okay, so that's really powerful instead of having to keep reloading it every time. Now to stop the server, you can go down here and see where it says port 5500. You can click that, or you can right click, and actually I guess you can't right click. So you just click the port 5500, that stops the server, and if I try to reload this page, it doesn't work, okay? So if you don't want to use a server like that and you just want an easy way to open your HTML files, another extension that I'd recommend is Open in Browser. So let's see right here, Open in Browser. Let's install that. Okay, so now we have the index.html file here, and I'm just going to right click and I'm going to say Open in Default Browser, and you'll see that opens. I don't think it has auto load. Let me just check. Save. Yeah, so it doesn't have auto load, so if I save, I actually have to reload. So I don't use this too much because I do use live server, so there's really no reason for me to use this, but it is an option. All right, another extension that I like is VS Code Icons, which gives you some nice looking icons for each file type. So let's go ahead and install this. And we'll click reload. And now if we go to our file manager here, actually we have to activate it. We'll get this little drop down. We'll say activate. And now you'll get these little icons. So you can see for HTML files, I have this HTML5 logo, and then we have these little JS. So when you start to use other file types like PHP or .py files, you'll have those icons as well. So it's just it's not really used for like, you know, efficiency or anything like that, but it's just cool. It's just nice to look at, I guess. And I guess it makes you realize what type of file it is quicker. Okay, another extension that I like is Faker. So this is actually from Faker.js, but it's called VS Code Faker. And what this does is it allows you to generate fake addresses, credit card numbers, finance info, all kinds of stuff for your just basically test data. So let's go ahead and click reload. And now let's say, let's go down here and we'll just have a div, and let's say we wanted to put a name in here. So what I could do is go to the command palette and type in Faker, and I could choose something from here. Let's see. So I'll choose Faker name, and you can choose from first name, last name, all this other stuff, title, job stuff. I'm going to choose first name, and it gives us Laverne. Okay, so it's just a way to create fake data on the fly. I guess a name isn't really, I mean, you could just think of a name in a second, but you can do like addresses and credit card numbers and phone numbers, things like that. Now, those are really the general extensions that I use. All the other extensions I use pertain to a certain language or framework. For instance, I use PHP IntelliSense. So this has IntelliSense and advanced auto completion for PHP. So that I would definitely recommend if you're doing any kind of PHP development with Visual Studio Code. So we'll go ahead and reload that. Another one that I use is Angular version 5 snippets, which is, let's see, this one here by John Papa. So I usually use that. And that will just give you code highlighting, code hinting, everything you need for Angular. And it says version 5, but it'll also work for Angular 4 and Angular 2. All right, for vanilla JavaScript, I would recommend the ES6 snippets. So this right here, JavaScript ES6 code snippets. I definitely recommend that if you're working with, promises and anything to do with ES6 plus. All right, and I'm trying to think for React. Let's see, what do I use for React? So you have React Native tools. You have, I think this is the one that I usually use. React Native, React, and Redux snippets for ES6 and ES7. So I would definitely recommend that for React. All right, and then also Vue.js. Let's see, Vue 2 snippets. So that's what I would suggest for Vue. And then for Python, I'd suggest just this top one here. There's 4.8 million downloads. And this gives you everything you need for Python. All right, so those are the extensions that I use. Now, I want you guys to make any recommendations that that you feel others could benefit from. So extensions that you guys use that has really made your coding and your development more efficient, more quick, easier. Because like I said, I'm not a huge tooling person, and a lot of that comes from what I do. I make tutorials, and I don't want my editor to look like something that doesn't match anybody else's, so that beginners get confused and we're both using VS Code, but they're asking me what editor I'm using. I've had that happen before. So that's one of the reasons I'm very simplistic with this stuff. Now, I know I mentioned that I'd get into version control, so I'm just going to do the very basics here. Just create a initialize a repository and push it to GitHub. So I'm going to do the very, very basics here and just create a repository. So this is my GitHub account, and I'll just click the plus sign, new repository. And we'll call this weather.js, and we'll say simple weather app using the W Underground API, and create repository. Okay, so now usually what we do is just type this stuff in the command line, but we have integrated functionality that we can use here. If we just click on the version control, and let's click this icon here to initialize it as a repository. So we'll click initialize repository, and what that does is it creates a .git file or .git folder. Excuse me. So as you can see, all the files now have this U next to them, which means unstaged or untracked. So what we want to do is click up here and go to stage all changes, and that adds them to the staging area. You can see index added. Then what we want to do is, when we're sure, we want to go ahead and commit all. It'll ask us for a commit message, so we'll just say initial commit and enter, and now we have no changes here. Okay, now if I go and change something, like let's say just add a comma here, a comment, we'll just say test and save, then that gets put into the unstaged changes. Or actually, this is modified. So what we want to do is add that. And you can actually see the difference between your new change and the old file that's in the repository. So let's go ahead and say, let's do commit all. Actually, you should probably stage it first. So we'll do stage all changes. Okay. And then we'll go commit staged. Commit message, we'll say added comment. Okay, so now we have no more changes here. And I'm just going to close that up. Now, this is all local. Okay, this is all in our local repository. If you want to push to GitHub, then you need to add this as a remote repository. So this right here. So I'm going to grab that and just open the terminal and paste that in. All right, so now that's added as a remote repository. So let's go ahead and go up here and say push to, and we have that option as our repository. So we'll choose that. and that should be pushing it to the master branch. Now if I reload, you can see all of our files are here. And if I look at index.html, we have that test comment there. So if I want to change something, like let's say we'll change test to hello. If we save that, okay, now this is modified. We want to stage this. So let's say stage changes. We can do it from here or up here. And then let's go up here and say commit staged. We'll say changed comment. And then we'll push it. So we'll go push. Has no master branch. Okay, so we want to push to here. And that should do it. So if we look at our index, and you can see now the comment says hello. All right, so this is just the core basics of how this works. Another thing we could do is we can have a .getignore file. And the purpose of this file is for things that you don't want to include in your Git repository. So let's say we have, let's do test.txt, and we don't want that to go to the Git repository. So what I'll do is let's go to the version control. You can see it's unstaged or untracked, but I'm going to add this to the getignore. So if we go ahead and do that, you can see our getignore file now has test.txt. So now if we make another change, let's change it to hello1 and save. And then let's go ahead and stage. So we'll say stage all changes, and then we'll say commit all. And we'll put a commit message. I'll just say another change and enter. And then let's push to GitHub. Go over here. If I reload our index page, now it's hello1 is the comment. And if we go back to the repository, whoops, you can see that there is no test.txt because that's in our getignore file. Okay. And we can see all the commits that we've made right here. So we've made 4 commits. So initial, added comment, change comment, and another change. So as I said, I don't use this too much. I mean, I do use it, but I use the standard commands much more. So maybe this is something I should get into a little more. Maybe it's more efficient. What I'm going to do is I'm going to link another video from one of my mods on my Discord server. Simon also goes by Cookie Monster on the server, and he made a video on VS Code, and he goes more in depth into Git, into branches and so on, along with some other stuff. So it's a new channel, he's just getting started, so show him some love, go over there, watch that video if you're interested. And that's it, guys. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.